Differentiated instruction, or differentiation, is the acknowledgement that our students learn differently. This means that teaching and learning can be more effective if we plan for and address these differences when we teach. Differentiated instruction includes content. This is what you're teaching. This includes the ideas and information I want my students to know. Process. This is how you teach. How will your students take in what you are teaching? Product. This is how the students will show you what they have learned. An environment. The climate and structure of the classroom. It takes each of these components working together to effectively differentiate in your classroom. So how can your content be differentiated? What does that look like? Remember that content includes ideas and information your students need to know. There are many different ways we can differentiate the content, but here are a few examples. Role-playing, offering books at different reading levels, and providing visual and auditory content to your students. Let's listen to a short example from the audiobook Hatchet by Gary Paulson.
At first he thought it was a growl. In the still darkness of the shelter in the middle of the night, his eyes came open and he was awake and he thought there was a growl.
Your students may prefer print versions of the text or audiobooks. Either way, it's great to offer a variety in your differentiated classroom. The process is how we teach and how students make sense of what we want them to learn. What activities or learning tasks will you ask your students to complete during the lesson? These are part of the process. In a differentiated instruction classroom, students should be able to work alone, with partners, or in small groups or in centers. Scaffolding is also a great way to ensure equity in your classroom. Scaffolding is providing temporary supports to students that need it. The purpose of scaffolding is to provide these supports and then remove them when the students are ready. I'll share some examples with you. Bookmarks are a great example of ways students can use them as a support of scaffolding while reading or learning a topic. Chunking information is also important because it breaks down the concepts into smaller chunks so that students can understand smaller portions that build up to a main concept. Text marking or teacher annotations for students help guide their thinking while reading a text. Some students need this support before beginning their own annotations. It helps guide their thinking once they begin their work. Graphic organizers can also be great in the classroom. These can be differentiated by a student. For example, one may have more information to provide more supports to the students that need them. Here's an example of one from Scholastic. So if you see on the left, you'll see that it's a blank graphic organizer. However, the graphic organizer on the right shows that the teacher has pre-checked answers to guide the students' thinking and learning through this graphic organizer. These are just some of the ways that you can incorporate differentiated instruction through the process. Now we'll discuss the product. This is where and how students show you what they have learned. This will look very different from classroom to classroom, but should offer students the opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge through a variety of methods. Here are some examples of products. Students could either draw or label or write a summary. They would have a choice between the two. You could also have teacher-created project ideas where you give students some leeway on what they create, but they're basically the teacher's ideas. They could create puppet shows. Students also could work to create brochures and even websites. But it's important to also allow student choice. This would be student-generated ideas for projects, but they would have to meet the requirements of all the other projects. And as long as they did that, they would have a voice and choice in what they created. Students' feelings and attitudes are influenced by the learning environment. In order to ensure a safe and effective learning environment, make sure students' needs are met. Here are some ways you can differentiate instruction with the learning environment. Review and practice procedures so that students understand what is expected and how to proceed without the teacher's immediate assistance. Ensure you provide class materials that reflect different cultures and settings at home. Make sure that you have a place in your classroom for both collaboration and quiet time. Your students will need both. And then remind the students to respect each other's needs and differences. It's critical that every student in our room feels safe and feels respected.
The key elements to successful differentiation are respectful tasks, flexible grouping, and ongoing assessments. Respectful tasks and products are designed to ensure that each student's work is interesting and engaging, as well as providing them an opportunity to grapple with new concepts and information. These respectful tasks are thought of as the products in planning your differentiated lesson. Flexible grouping is the next key component in differentiated instruction. Teachers will design their flexible grouping based on a variety of criteria, and then they will design and post the charts like you see here to determine where the groups are meeting, as well as who is meeting in each group. These should be able to be changed and intermixed so students can efficiently get to each station or team they are meeting with that day. Flexible groups can be created in several ways. Teachers can create groups based on instructional levels or readiness levels. They can also create groups randomly or by interest level. Groups can also be created based on the final product that students will create in a task-based group. Students could have the choice of the group they're in, or students can work in mixed ability groups. Flexible grouping is just that, flexible. Just remember, however you form them, groups do not last forever. Students can move in and out of groups depending on their needs. Even ability or skill-based groups should change as students make progress. Independent work is important too. Students should be able to complete independent work successfully. Think about how you can scaffold independent work so that it's not too difficult for your students. Use pre-test assessment data, observations, and small group instruction to gauge the level of your independent work for each student. Their prior learning will help you plan for their future learning. This independent work will help them master the skills that they are practicing in their groups as well. Ongoing assessment is key in effective differentiated instruction. Frequent formative assessments should drive grouping decisions. It will ensure that your students are getting instruction to support their readiness levels. How well the teacher serves as a change agent within the classroom is determined by the continual use of measured and informed assessments, both formative and summative. There are 3 stages of assessment to support differentiation. First, we need to plan for instruction, including our pre-assessment data. What do we find out about our students within our pre-assessment data? What do they already know and understand within the unit? And what do we need to continue to practice and to continue to make sure they understand? When we move forward in our instructional plans, we will be sure that our flexible groups and our instruction is led by this pre-assessment data. So we look at different types of pre-assessment that will help us assess where our students are as we begin our lesson, and here are several types. You could offer a quiz, it could be a quick paper, you could be listening to student questioning as you probe the class for prior knowledge. It could be a concept map that you create or a KWL chart where you're writing down what they already know and what they want to know. The second stage for assessment to support differentiation is implementing instruction that includes flexible grouping, instructional strategies, and formative assessment. Formative assessment during a lesson is providing guided practice for students, adjusting instruction on the fly as we understand the misconceptions our students have, or that we're ready to challenge them further. We're also checking for understanding by asking questions and probing for further knowledge. We're looking also at guiding future instruction when we're gauging what they are already learning and where we need to move for our next lesson. This formative assessment is providing a snapshot of how teaching and learning occurs while it's actually happening in the classroom and gives us guidance on where to go next. There are several types of things we can do to differentiate that assessment during instruction. We might have a think aloud or a minute paper, a concept map, or even an observation of what we see our students doing while they're having discussions during a think, pair, share, or creating a screenplay. The third stage of assessment to support differentiation is evaluating instruction. This includes summative assessment. There are several types of post-assessments. We think of quizzes or exit tickets, polls, peer assessment, questions and answers. You can use rubrics or not, depending on whether or not you have a traditional assessment or an authentic type of assessment. But these assessments should all be used to gauge what your next steps are in the learning process. The 3 stages of assessment will provide support for differentiation. Through assessment, we will be able to gauge our students' progress and analyze the results of their data. Therefore, we can plan in order to achieve the highest success for each student so that every student will make gains and therefore succeed. Differentiation is a response to our student needs. We use assessment to guide our response. Whether it's formative or summative assessment, we are providing support that students need to achieve the standards and their goals for learning. Both research and classroom experience supports that students have differences within 3 areas that can strongly impact their learning: in readiness, interest, and learning profiles. Teachers who differentiate instruction adapt the classroom elements of content, process, product, and learning environment to address each student's needs in these areas.